Welcome to Myth Informed. I'm your host, Brian Edward, along with my co-host, Sean Frasick. Hey. Today, we have a special guest, and I wouldn't say that, if people accuse us sometimes of talking to people we agree with, we're definitely talking to somebody that we will agree with to a degree, but probably more disagree with. Music Man Mike on YouTube. He has been a critic of Mythcon. He's from New Zealand, I believe, a Kiwi, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and a self-described social justice warrior. And he even threw that on there.
Social justice bard. Sorry, social justice bard.
Social justice what?
Bard. So like the guy who plays music.
Bard. Okay. Oh, yeah. Bard.
Yeah.
Social justice bard. Right. And quote, loser who gets beta cucked by the government. Like. So even in his own bio, he said that he shitposts, and we've been back and forth, Mike and I, on Twitter, and he was saying that 95% of his posts are shitposts. Like, can you describe that for us? Like, what's a shitpost?
I think for me, it's just like it's kind of like exposing stupidity through humor, I suppose. So a lot of the time, my tweets will be taking something like a tweet that someone said and then just kind of rephrasing it in like a satirical way to poke fun at whatever the person has said. And so that's generally how I do things. I try to avoid arguing on Twitter because in any facet of life, whenever I'm arguing with someone, like if it's my girlfriend or whatever, you try to argue over Facebook Messenger. It just turns everything into a big pile of garbage when, if you talk face to face or over a thing like this, it can be a much more productive conversation.
Oh, and I think that's, we're really excited to have you come to Mythcon, and you are going to be engaging in some of those conversations in person. And before we move too far ahead, we just want to thank the Liberalist International Association for sponsoring Mythcon this year. You can find out all about them on the website. And yeah, Mike, so obviously you were a critic last year of Mythcon, and you questioned some of the things that we were doing, but this year you decided to come. Like, what made you
and be a speaker?
Yeah, so. And what made you decide to come this year?
Well, first of all, I was invited this year, so
that's fair.
Second of all, I was told there was an open bar, so that's
Well, someone lied to you there.
I know that my friends Chris Yossity and Vadim are coming as well, and it was Vadim who kind of put me to this in the first place, I suppose, because he kind of messaged me and told me about the opportunity, I suppose. And I mean, people kind of caricature. I mean, I don't want to be too broad about things, but like my position specifically, and then like my group of political allies, I suppose, as being too scared to engage with the other side or whatever. And I'm not. I'm very happy to have a conversation with anyone, really. My issues with Mythcon in general were more to do with the policies surrounding harassment and bullying and things like that, and we can get into that if you like.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I'm not quote unquote scared to talk to people of opposing opinions, if that's what you're asking.
Right. No. What was it with like harassment and bullying that you were upset with, specifically, like as it applies to Mythcon?
Yeah. So my main issue was to do with the people that have been invited, and then the stated policies to do with harassment and bullying. And I think that to say that that you are opposed to, and that you're opposed to bullying and harassment, and that you don't support it in whatever aspect, but then to invite speakers to an event, or to platform people at an event whose career is kind of built off profiting from that behavior, it seems kind of hypocritical to me. And that was my main issue in the first place.
Isn't the definition of a bully pretty subjective? Like, you know, one person's best friend's another person's bully. You know, I mean, how do
Yeah,
we
so my I mean, if you look at what people describe as a bully, and I suppose the purest form is it's an imbalance of power, right? It's a person who has power using that power to oppress or abuse or you know, other people. And in the case of like internet harassment, you've got guys. So I mean, I'm obviously talking about Sargon Card at this point. So Sargon has hundreds of thousands of followers on his channel, and it's not just to do with the size of the audience; it's the behavior of the audience and the behavior of the person involved. And so when he engages in certain behavior, that reliably results in the harassment or the abuse of other people. So when he tweeted at what was the lady's name? There was a British MP, and she was
Jess Phillips.
Yeah, that's right. And so she was she was setting up some sort of organizational thingamajig to do with making internet safer, I suppose, to do with harassment and bullying, rather ironically. And so and he tweeted at her, "I wouldn't even rape you," and that resulted in her receiving all these abusive messages and things like that. And that is what you would call being a bully. He knows that this stuff happens as a result of his behavior, and yet he continues to engage in that.
But I heard a number of times. One, like Jess Phillips was blocked from ever. She had Sargon blocked, so she didn't see the tweet. And I've seen Sargon, and I've seen others say specifically, "Don't contact this person, whoever we're talking about. Don't do it."
Well, and I'll just take it a step further in that the bullying and harassment policy that we have in place is to protect attendees, guests, anybody that we have on site at live events, right?
Yeah, I get that.
Our bullying policy does not police the internet, nor
no. And so that's not my issue, though. My issue is that if you say that you're against bullying, but
sure,
people who are
with the Sargon thing, the way we saw it is that, that's a political thing. That obviously political figures get these types of communications all the time. It's not really our job to police that. So but I understand what you're saying. But when it comes to actual like harassment campaigns and an organization getting bullied last year, we had thousands and thousands of tweets. We had our venue got contacted. We had individuals being contacted. There were all of these threats and all of these mischaracterizations of us. And funnily enough, I mean, I'm not saying you have anything to do with this, but that didn't come from the side that was being criticized. That came from the quote unquote social justice warriors, if you will. And so for us, like, that was one of the things where it's like, we have to check our hypocrisy at the door. If we think people are bullying, maybe using the same tactics isn't the best idea.
Mm-hmm. No, but again, I take it back to people tend to focus on the individual rather than on the sort of the group, because I mean, you can if you take just two people and you're talking about one thing said to another person, one person says one thing to another person, that is not necessarily bullying. You can say one thing to another person and that's fine. I can tweet something at someone and that's fine. I can criticize people. I can swear at someone. I can say abusive things. Okay, just on a one-to-one standard. At that level, that is in itself not necessarily bullying. But then when you take into account the effects of social media, the effects of a large audience, the effects of an influence over a large audience, when, say, I have an audience of 1 million people and I tweet something abusive at someone else, that can or cannot influence my audience to engage in similar behavior. And invariably, that's what happens when people like Sargon, people like Baron, people like Undoomed make videos about people. When they tweet about people, their audience is influenced to go to that to the person they have tweeted about or made a thing about, and leave abusive comments, leave downvotes, all the sort of stuff that depending on depending on who the person is. I mean, maybe it's, if we're talking about a political figure like Jess Phillips, maybe it's not as big of a deal because she's a big public figure or whatever. I think it is, but like if we're talking about a person who's got maybe 100 subscribers on YouTube and has just made a video about why I'm a feminist or something like that, and someone like Sargon comes along, finds that video, makes a video, you know, ripping it apart or whatever, you know, and then that person receives thousands upon thousands of abusive messages saying, "Oh, kill yourself, you stupid feminist bitch," you know, that's the sort of stuff that happens.
Yeah. Well, that's unfortunately that's part of living the life in the public eye, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but at the same time, you know, when we were under the harassment campaign last year, you know, we took it in stride and we kept doing what we wanted to do because that was our passion, and this is what's, you know, what we wanted.
I know, but my issue is with the people who are influencing, right? So I mean, you know, when we're talking about you guys receiving it, and I'm not at all condoning the behavior that a group of people would take towards you guys, but like if you can specifically pick out a person, in this case Sargon of Akkad, who has a big audience, who has a history of having, you know, dogpiling from his audience, if you can see a pattern arising and recognize that you know, that making a video then results in this sort of thing, you can condemn that behavior. It's difficult to condemn it to the audience, but you can condemn the person for continuing to engage in that behavior. And I think there are steps those people can take towards you know, mitigating that harmful behavior from their audience. But these people don't.
Because I see Bering and I see Sargon specifically saying, don't contact this person, or sometimes not even saying the person's name or giving any way to contact them or find their YouTube channel at all. Like I see these people taking the steps, right? I mean, when you get popular, like, you know, you just don't know what's going to happen. But to me, I judge it on reaction. It does seem like they do care about these kind of things.
Well, I mean, for example, you look at someone like Hank Green or John Green. Those guys have massive audiences and they are popular, but they don't have the same issue. And a lot of it's got to do with the sort of people that you pander to, I suppose. Sargon and Bering, their content panders towards pieces of shit, basically, like really awful parts of the internet. They make their living from providing content to those kinds of people. And so to begin with, when you fill your audience with those sorts of people, that's the sort of thing that you're going to have. With, you know, and then I mean, the things that I've said, one of the things that I've said to Sargon and Bering a lot of the time is, if it's about the argument, if it's about criticizing a point of view or an argument, you don't need to include the person in the video at all. You could you could transcribe their words and criticize that argument. But
you can, but often, like, you will see somebody say, well, intersectionality doesn't say that, or I have not heard a social justice warrior say that. So sometimes you have to give a quote in order to, you know, say that you're not arguing against a straw man. But to say too that to judge kind of a large audience like Bering's or Sargon's, to me sounds like, you know, the hardcore Christian saying anyone that would ever go to a Judas Priest or Ozzy Osbourne concert, they make music for sickos. Those are terrible, disgusting people. Like, to me, like you maybe one or two are, but one or two classical music lovers are probably gross, horrible people. Like, how can we judge this huge group that you mostly don't know by a handful of examples?
Because I don't think music, I mean, music is a very subjective and symbolic art form that, you know, is very opinionated, right? I mean, you can like or not like a certain type of music, but it doesn't necessarily portray specific ideas, unless you're talking about like specific lyrical content. But like the stuff that Sargon and Bering make it's just trash. It's reactionary nonsense that panders to like the basest.
Like what, though? He's making a number. They make a number of arguments that to me seem like philosophy.
Arguments. No. I mean, Bering just makes videos being like, "Oh, look at the stupid fucking SJW idiot. Look how dumb they are. Oh, fucking, oh, piece of shit. Oh, SJW's a cancer. Ha, I'm out. See you bye." that's a summation of every varying video.
Break down the arguments. Like if somebody says, I don't know, that bullying is bad and you should never call a person a racial slur, and then he shows that person on camera calling other people racial slurs, that's hypocritical, right? That's something you ought to do.
But he doesn't do that stuff though.
But he does. Like,
well,
we're talking about Bearing here. He's one of the stupidest people I know, to be honest.
I mean, but let's be fair though. I mean, there are people on the other side that do the exact same thing. I mean, they'll dedicate entire live streams to talking about people in negative ways. I mean,
yeah, and I mean, I kind of just stopped now. I mean, like, I used to do a lot of like drama-y kind of stuff on my channel, but I'm sick of it. I just don't really do it anymore. And
yeah. And that's what we're trying to do with Mythcon. Like that was the thing, you know, you had made a comment before we went on air, you know, it's hard to have conversations on Twitter. It's kind of like a joke in some cases. And, you know, like bringing these different points of view to the stage, I think is important. I think that's how we're going to, you know, make progress on whatever issue it is. And, yeah. You know, so you know, that's our goal with what we're doing. And yeah, I agree. Especially Twitter and, you know, the internet, a lot of it's reactionary. A lot of it's going for clicks. I mean, how many news
totally
clickbait and you know, but I think these actual conversations like we're having right now, I think this is how you kind of move the stuff forward instead of calling people names or making things up or, you know, whatever the case is.
Yeah. So why don't we get at some of like the conversations that we were having? And I will admit our back and forth on Twitter have been pleasant. And I've appreciated that. And like one of the things we were talking about is white privilege. And I kind of disagree with the concept. At least at a minimum, I disagree with the name, right? Because there is privilege, right? People that are tall are privileged, people that are good looking are privileged, people that are born into wealth are privileged, but there's nothing about being white that your skin having a less melanin makes you privileged. Like, would you agree with that or disagree?
I disagree with that. Like, because we're talking about like systemic oppression, right? We're talking about the way that you are viewed societally, and you can look at the way that black people versus white people is treated in a society, and how, you know, from the moment that you're born, you are more statistically likely to for certain things to happen to you, and that's just the way that it is. I mean, you know, if you I mean, you can get really far into the whole thing of like of the way that, you know, society is structured and the way that like voting areas are structured to allow for certain groups of people to be able to vote, and for those and you know, areas, you know, like slummy areas, to do with things like that. I'm sorry, I'm babbling a little bit, but there was a really great video I think that you should watch by ContraPoints about white privilege and to do with the death of like Trayvon Martin and the environment that he was brought up in, and the way that just because of society and because of the government, because of legislation and because of like lead paint and things like that, you know, all these things along the way led up to him basically being shot because of being a black man.
But wouldn't it be like suburban? Like there's a big difference between white suburbia and like the rural poor West Virginian. I mean,
yeah. So there's differences in class as well, right? So I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you know, and this is kind of where intersectionality comes in. You can look at the effects of, you know, of your quote unquote race or skin color and how that will, you know, on a population basis affect you as a person, and then you can take into account other things that intersect with that, like class, like gender, like sexuality, all those sorts of things. So, you know, as a transgender woman or a transgender woman of color, you're more likely to commit suicide in your life. That is an aspect. As someone who is not a transgender person of color, you have the privilege of not that happening. That's kind of what it means when you say white privilege. You know,
and so you're saying, okay, well, yeah. So if you're a poor white person, it maybe the socioeconomic portion is pulling you down more than the whiteness is bringing you up. But
exactly.
it does suggest that being white always, in all circumstances,
No. That is a straw man.
Why don't we name it dominant culture privilege? I think there's a reason why they call it white privilege. I think the authors want it to be divisive. That is my opinion. I think, or else
that is a judgment on someone's intent, which you can't.
Well, but just call it dominant culture privilege, and then it avoids the racial division. Because then it would apply to China, it could apply to Malaysia, you know, where and Japan.
Yeah, but I mean, like, we're talking specifically about American culture. When we, you know, I mean, you can get specific on what you're talking about. Okay, you know, people do bring up that they're like, okay, well, in Asian cultures, you know, white people are going to have it. It's going to be, of course, it's going to be different. It's a different culture, but I mean, we need to be specific about what we're talking about.
I've read the literature. They say that white supremacy culture, right? And white supremacy has been redefined. Essentially, white supremacy culture is American or European culture, but they say it's global. Like it really. I don't know
what you're talking about when you said they. Who's they?
The critical authors of critical theory and the academics that work.
But now we've gone from white privilege to white supremacy. What?
Sure.
I'm confused.
Well, to me, like white privilege and white supremacy, as I read when I read the text, that they're sometimes often used interchangeably.
Well, American culture is founded on white supremacy, like literally.
Okay, but so you see, like right now, like as obviously we had slavery, right, and that there were clear racial attitudes that were being pumped up even by contemporaries at that time. But do you see? Okay, so if we're founded on white supremacy, do you see it now?
Yes. Now,
and to what degree?
Okay. So let me ask a question. If so, you've got hundreds of years of okay, so let me start again. You've got a group of people, the British, who enslaved another group of people, brought them to America, genocided the native people, and then set up a white supremacist state, basically, founded on slavery and oppression of an entire group of people. That went forward for a couple of hundred years or whatever, and then, you know, slavery was abolished. Okay, great. And then we have like several hundreds or I can't remember how long exactly, but, you know, years of Jim Crow law and all that sort of stuff, apartheid state, basically all that sort of stuff, which has only just recently been abolished. But still, you know, can you not see how that would leave a lasting impression on the society? I mean, you can't just say, okay, slavery was outlawed, Jim Crow was outlawed, racism was done. You know, that seems. How can you not see that there would be lingering effects?
But as I have not talked to anyone that is proud, any American that's ever said, I'm proud of the past, our past ancestors that have enslaved people, that I'm proud that we passed Jim Crow laws and had, you know, Supreme Court decisions that said separate but equal. I've not found a single person that would praise that. And it seems like in a white supremacy culture, I would at least run into that once in a while, but I never have.
You can.
I don't know anyone that.
You can hold white supremacist views without. I mean, because see, the thing is, white supremacy and racist. You know, these words they come with a certain, you know, charge behind them, right? And no one wants to be known of it. You know, you're not going to be proud of being. I mean, sure, there's probably some people who are, but in general, what I'm trying to say is, you're not going to be proud of being a racist. You're not going to be proud of being a white supremacist. You're not going to be proud of being a bigot. So, you know, the idea that you are that is going to be abhorrent to you. But that does not mean that you can't hold those supremacist ideas.
No, but I think that it does. I haven't met these people, but if I could travel back in time to the 1920s, I'm going to find a ton of proud bigots. People that say, I would never be dead with a black man at a dinner. They're proud of their bigotry. So, I would challenge that. I think that there are plenty of people that were proud of their bigotry.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that people wouldn't be, but I'm saying in this day and age, right? In this day and age, it's obviously a taboo thing to be. But again, that does not exclude someone from being able to hold bigoted ideas. It's far more nuanced than just like, you know, I hate black people. Because that's the thing, is I come across these people, we talk about racism or whatever, or they talk about transphobia, or they talk about any one of these bigotries, and they think of it exclusively as just like a burning hatred for black people. But
Well,
That's
the bigoted,
not,
like the prejudge, the disdaining, like prejudge. Like, but that's the thing. But we should use different words than say have a slight distaste for or something, because
like,
you're
again,
using
I try to
the definition, the standard, the old definition of racism that we used in the 20s and the 50s, using the same word for the powerful effect, but you're describing something that's small. It's kind of saying
words
I had a
change as
heart
we
attack,
start to understand
I
and
coughed.
start to grow as a culture, right? I mean, words change and evolve. That's how language works. And I think, I mean, like, okay, so let me define to you what I mean by racist and what I could consider being racist, because I do concede that it can, you know, I could use that word and people could think that I'm meaning a completely different thing. So, like, when I talk about someone like Candace Owens, who is a black conservative woman, she, in my under my definition of racism, is a racist because she perpetuates harmful, racist misinformation, which helps to continue and perpetuate the disenfranchisement and what's the word? Let's just keep it disenfranchisement of Black American people. She engages in behavior that helps to perpetuate the marginalization of Black American people. And
No, I mean, well, that's debatable. Like, oh, give me one example that you think that she's done that.
I mean, I can't think off the top of my head. I mean, she supports Donald Trump for one. You know, I mean, she works for Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA, who are a openly racist organization who are funded by the Koch brothers, who are two white billionaires who spend their money to perpetuate you know, far right propaganda. That's basically her job, you know.
You know, but okay, now do you mean that like absolutely word for word, or is that more of a shit post that you kind of just, you don't like Turning Point USA, you don't like
that's literally what they do.
So yeah, the Turning Point USA is openly racist. So
No. Again, no. So no, they.
It's weird to put a black woman up as your figurehead if you were openly racist.
Yeah, no. So that's I mean that's the definition of tokenism, right? I mean, of course they're gonna try to hide the fact that they're racist.
Okay,
But
so that means
again, it's not.
People don't act a certain way, and they don't hold XYZ political views, and you have kind of someone going against the grain, like a Kanye West or a Candace Owens or a Larry Elder. That those people are tokens, Uncle Toms. I mean, to me, that the slur of Uncle Tom is just it's horrible. I wouldn't use that, nor would I use the like. Why do black people have to think a certain way? I don't get it.
No, I'm not saying that black people have to act a certain way. I'm just saying that black people can. And I mean, okay, so today, you know, I mean, I say this a lot, but I mean, your identity doesn't exclude you from bigotry, you know. So, you know, a woman can be misogynistic, a black person can be racist, a trans person can be transphobic, a gay person can be homophobic. These are things, you know, having that identity does not magically make you unable to be those things, right?
I just don't see any evidence that she hates black people.
Again, I think that you're simplifying it too much. She engages in rhetoric and behavior that helps to perpetuate the marginalization of an entire group of people, and that is a racist action.
But so what does that include? Like the Condoleezza Rice or Larry Elder or Thomas Sowell? Like,
I don't know who they are. Sorry.
These are all black. These are all people that are kind of born into black conservatism, and they're say maybe 10% of the black community that looks at that are pro Second Amendment, right? They think gun ownership is their right. These are conservatives, and again, you see them more voting Republican. Again, this is overall in America. This is a small group of people, but aren't we just discriminating against black conservatives? Because, I mean, can you name me a black conservative that hasn't been vilified as an Uncle Tom? I can't.
Well, again, I don't know what Uncle Tom means, so you'd have to explain that to me.
Like that every black conservative that of any repute that I know has been called a race traitor by at least some of the major media and punditry. So to me, it seems like there's an enforcement that says if you're a black person, you step out of line, there's consequences, and you're going to lose your blackness, and we're going to call you white supremacist. Like, and
again, I think
reading those sources. Like,
again, I think you need to look at the situation and say, well, I mean, okay. Let me see if we agree or not. Do you think that a person of color, like a black person, can hold white supremacist ideas? Do you think that is possible?
I suppose. I
interesting
mean,
question.
they would have to really hate themselves, but I suppose we did meet one non-white white nationalist at one point, so I suppose it's possible. I doubt that that's anywhere close to the norm.
Okay, so what is it about being a black person that means you can't hold racist or white supremacist ideas?
Well, I don't think you can. But when we talked to, like, we did meet one non-white white nationalist, but this person sounded exactly like white nationalists. So I mean, there was no difference in the talking points whatsoever. So I mean, to me, you would have to demonstrate that Candace Owens talks like, I don't know, Jared Taylor or Richard Spencer or Millennial.
Again, it's a distinction between like the noun white supremacist and white supremacist ideas. I mean, there are, the white supremacy is an ideology, and there are certain, you can, there can be parts of that you can either agree with or that you can perpetuate. As any person, it doesn't,
what specifically is she done to do that? To me,
hold on. I'm trying to find some of the things that I believe. I mean, we can extrapolate this to like I say, any other identity. And
well, the
like,
one
for example,
thing that we talked about on Twitter that specifically I remember was Candace Owens said that this was, quote, brainwashing, and she had a picture, or she tweeted out a picture of a social justice course in
that's right,
in criminology. I think I don't know if I have the exact course, but it referenced critical theory, and she says that this was brainwashing students to hate law enforcement, and you took objection with that.
Oh yeah. So, I think that's fucking stupid. I think offering a course at the university is how is that brainwashing? That makes no sense at all. I mean, someone can come along and choose to. I mean, my experience in university. I mean, it's not like you're standing there and you're being preached to by a pastor or whatever. You go along, you take part in the class. There's open discussion. You have little side groups and things like that where you discuss these ideas. I mean, that's all it is. I mean, how is that brainwashing?
Well, part of it is that they admit in the course description that it's going to draw a ton on critical theory, and critical theory is already completely made up its mind that white supremacy is global. So it must be in America, and they reference white supremacy as like the prison industrial complex. And to me, like, there are white people in prison too, and so it does, and it doesn't add up. I mean, the people that in prison, like, hopefully are not innocent. Hopefully they've committed crimes, but regardless of what race we see more, I mean, they've committed a crime. And it quote unquote, it said law enforcement. They actually put it in quote. He goes, "We will discuss our current white supremacist law enforcement." So to me,
okay, so when you look at
brainwashing,
so when you
like, it'll be looked at in any kind of critical lens that would be open for any discussion. But go on.
I mean, that just doesn't add up for me again, because I don't see how offering a course in which you discuss certain ideas to be brainwashing. But I mean, when you look at the statistics surrounding incarceration in the United States, black people are disproportionately incarcerated, more so than white people, right? I mean, and so you can take that as a statistic and be like, okay, this is what we've got. You've got to try and draw some conclusions from that. So,
but does that mean systemic? Men are in prison much more so than women, and we quote unquote have a patriarchy. That doesn't make any sense.
Sure it does. I mean, there are aspects of patriarchy which, I mean, okay. So no, we're not off on different tangents here, because we're talking about the prison system, and when we're talking about patriarchy, I mean, I don't know if we we refer to a prison system as patriarchy. But if we're talking about society in which a patriarchy exists, there are certain parts of patriarchy which will encourage certain behaviors in men. But I mean, that's got nothing to do with how many men are incarcerated. Sorry, that's kind of a red herring.
Might get into the weeds, but here's the point of critical theory that I don't like, right? And then patriarchy theory, and then how you say, you know, this is where intersectionality comes in. All of these things are based on all white people oppress all black people. All men.
No, that's not. That's a straw man.
No. That's it. I've read the literature. It's exactly.
Well, you misunderstood it because that's a straw. That's not what it means.
But you're still oppressing women, but you yourself, because you're gay, like you have oppression points of your own. But they're always telling black men that, you know, that you're still an oppressor. Like
no. Okay. So to be a white straight man does not mean that you are specifically oppressing anyone. The terms refer to a population, to a system, to a place in which, as a white man, you.
No, there's the white. No
fault of your own, because it's not your fault that you're born a white dude or that you're born a straight white dude. That's no fault of your own. It is the fault of the society and the system that we live under. And to quote unquote check your privilege is to understand those advantages and to understand the disadvantages that other people are afforded. As, you know, a black trans woman, for example, we talked about it before. You know, there are certain hurdles in place when those people, you know, are living as those people, and that does not mean that those people cannot succeed. It's obvious. There are, you know, we had a black president. We have successful black people and we have successful trans people. But systemically, on a population basis, you are more or less likely to be able to or not be able to achieve based on certain aspects of your person or of your identity.
Right. But why? Well, because we're judging this, right? So if I get that, but then why can't I say, okay, X race over here has been involved in more thefts, so therefore I'm going to think you might be a thief when I see that person. This is teaching us to be prejudiced.
Well, and the interesting thing is, you know, Mike's coming. He's going to have this conversation on intersectionality with Peter Boghossian, Clay Rutledge, Chris Yosity, and
but there's
James Lindsay. But the interesting thing, Mike, for me, you know, I grew up in the inner city Chicago. I'm Mexican. And you know, when you guys are talking about a lot of white and black issues right now, it just seems to me that, you know, Hispanics and Asians and Indians and, you know, those are kind of always left out of the discussion for some reason. But
totally.
But you know, the point, it's just kind of funny on a national level for whatever reason, you know. But the interesting thing is, you know, like growing up in a Latin neighborhood, we didn't, you know, obviously there's certain customs, there's certain, you know, culture things that, you know, that I experienced. And, but for the most part, you know, we saw ourselves as Americans. And, you know, when you travel the world and you're an American, you know, I've been all over the world, and, you know, any country I go to, they don't see me as Mexican, they see me as American. So like on a national level, this is, you know, this is an interesting concept, because like there is this American privilege that comes, or just even a perception of what you are as an American. But like with intersectionality, I guess the thing that I struggle with is the fact that when you start breaking people down into groups and you start looking at them, I'm a Hispanic male, that's all I can be. Like there's certain things that come with that, when I actually don't identify as that. I identify as an American. I identify as a lot of things, but I necessarily identify as someone that needs to follow this Hispanic code, or, you know, be a part of a certain culture. I mean, I'm an atheist in the Hispanic culture.
Yeah, so I think you guys you're coming at it from the wrong angle. It's not a set of ways that people should be. It's looking at a culture, looking at statistics, looking at the way that things are, and drawing conclusions about that, and then looking at how to even things up. You know, I mean, it's not that we're saying that this is the way things should be. We're saying this is the way things are. Now, what can we do about it? We can say, you know, this is, you know, we can say black men are, you know, disproportionately incarcerated in the United States. We can look at that and say, okay, that is the case. Now, what can we do about it? What are the things that are affecting this? What are the reasons for why this is the case? When we talk about white supremacy in the prison system, we can talk about, you know, officers pulling people over, black people over more so than white people, you know, giving sentences, longer sentences or more harsh sentences for lesser crimes for black people as opposed to white people. You talk about drug-related things. You could talk about the war on drugs, which can have a disproportionately negative effect against black people in those cases. So you can talk about all of these things once you look at that, the reality of the situation, and then kind of go from there. And it's important to do that, not because we're trying to divide anyone up, but that's because that's just the way that things are in the society. I mean, you can say you don't identify as Mexican or whatever, but that doesn't mean that the society that you grow up in doesn't see you that way. It's not an individual thing; it's a populist thing.
Yeah, well, I understand all that, but you know, unfortunately, to me, the perception is I'm being put in a box still, and I don't like that. I don't like when people put me in a box. But the other thing that has confused me a little with the intersectionality and social justice in general, you know, there are atrocities happening all over the world. I mean, we talked about slavery in this country. Dubai is still using slave labor in their economy. They literally have slaves. And you know, when I see the, you know, the social, either that Saudi Arabia, the oppression of women, things like that, when I see these conversations happening, we're like really focused on these really small aspects in Western countries instead of focusing on, you know, it's kind of like the low-hanging fruit in the world. Like, what, you know, do you see, or am I off base? Like, where's the focus on helping?
So my issue with, there's a couple of things. First of all, that's called the fallacy of relative privation. I mean, the fact that there are worse problems elsewhere does not mean that we can't focus on specific issues, you know, more relative to me. I mean, I'm, you know, if I could, I suppose I could go and do something about the stuff in Saudi Arabia. But I mean, it's a matter of, I don't have the means, but I can do things like I can work at a summer camp, which I did just recently, and help the trans kids at that summer camp. You know, I can, you know, provide leadership and kind of a, you know, a role model for those kids at that camp. I mean, to say, I mean, that's just kind of a slippery slope, right? I mean, to say, okay, well, things are worse off elsewhere, then I shouldn't bother with the problems that are surrounding me. I mean, what are you going to do? Just sit in your lounge room and do nothing? It seems absurd to me.
Like we actually work with an organization called Feeding Mouths and Filling Minds, and they actually raised $75,000 for a university in Sierra Leone. We'll actually be traveling there this year to you know, for the final implementation of this university that's going to transform this entire area of Sierra Leone. It's the first university in this area. I mean, so like, you know, instead of getting on Twitter and arguing about what Trump has done or arguing about, you know, whatever, you know, Candace Owens or whatever, like this organization, Feeding Mouths, Filling Minds, they actually, you know, boots to the ground, got out there, raised the money. We're traveling out there to help them. So there are things, you know, someone like you who has influence on the internet, there are things you can do. There are things social justice warriors can do. I mean, you know,
plenty of people do.
Yeah, well,
but I also think that that's a little bit, I don't know. I mean, to say, you know, these are small issues in comparison. I think that's pretty unfair. I mean, you're characterizing the, you know, the struggles of other people. I mean, okay, sure, you know, they're throwing gays off buildings in Israel or whatever, you know, the normal kind of thing that people say. But I mean, yeah, I mean, there are how many states in America right now where you can be fired for being transgender? I mean, I just saw a video today about a 12-year-old transgender person who was basically run out of town because she was at school, she was just doing her thing, and then a parent like tweeted about her being, you know, like a pervert or something like that, and then it just kind of snowballed, and she's been kind of driven out of town, like, because they don't feel safe in that town anymore. So I mean,
that might have to do with her family, but legally, a company cannot fire somebody because they're transgender.
Right.
And no, they can't. There are multiple states in the US where it's still not illegal to fire someone for being transgender. I mean, I can find the thing for you if you like, but I mean,
well, yeah, because the federal law is that you can't discriminate.
I don't know if transgender's on the anti-discrimination. It doesn't mean it's.
I mean, and if someone did get fired
it might
over
fall under some other
yeah,
subsection.
but you'll have a crazy lawsuit
Yeah,
on your hands.
you will.
I mean, that I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Obviously, there's many companies in the U.S. alone, but there are means. The government does provide protection for workers based on race, gender,
and I think since transgender is so new that it's just not on there.
Well, it's not, I mean, it's not new.
If that is the case, if that is the case, Mike, if there is someone that got fired,
let us know.
Yeah, we would totally.
No, but I'm just what I'm saying is I'm giving you an example of issues that are important.
Yeah.
In this country, right? I mean, they're still debating about the transgender bathroom stuff. There's the I mean, gay marriage has only just recently been, so I mean, it's not like there aren't issues that aren't worth. And I mean, even that, when we talk about laws that are discriminatory, and that doesn't even scratch the surface on the way society views people. I mean, there's just
society's not a person though. When you say way society views, like society doesn't have come to a judgment, right? Society is.
Sure does. I mean, you can take an overall view of how society views. I mean, go back to the 50s or whatever. The way quote unquote society viewed gay people was that they were bad and evil.
Society has these judgments. I mean, here I'm going to give you a quote straight from the critical theory literature, and they say this: treason to whiteness is loyalty to humanity. Do you feel that's divisive? Because most people are just going to say treason to white people this is absolutely teaching prejudice.
But whiteness isn't white people. I mean, I don't know what the context of the quote is, so I can't really comment too much. But I mean, all I can say is that whiteness isn't white people.
Think of a good context for that quote. I can't think of any context other than somebody saying, "This is a bad quote. Let me read it." That it would be a good context.
I don't know. I'd have to look into it. I mean, again, all I'm saying is that saying that they treat women badly in the Middle East, therefore don't fight for equality and justice here in the States is a pretty silly position to hold.
But this is just promoting. It's promoting reverse racism. I don't think that many on this, but on their certain side, they want payback, not equity. But there's a bunch of them.
The point I was making with that, Mike, is I agree with you 100%. When you see oppression, no matter what country it is, it's something you definitely want to challenge. But the point I'm making is overall, like on Twitter, on social media or whatever, like the people we're focused on. I mean, we spent 5 minutes in the beginning talking about Sargon and Bering and what they're doing on their YouTube channel. I mean, there are actual atrocities. I don't see any focus on. I don't.
But no, I think that defending your principles is a worthwhile endeavor.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I mean that's what I try to do with myself. I mean, like on Twitter. I mean, you could say that it's petty, but I try to point out and change people's minds about the kind of perpetuation of transphobic rhetoric. I mean, the thing that I focus on quite heavily these days is transgender issues, and so and I have had people come to me and say, "Look, I used to think this way, and now I think this way about about these issues," and I also and I'd like to thank you for that. And so even just that small level of thing is cool for me. I try my best,
and I do think that the transgender population is probably going to be the most misunderstood. I think that the LGB portion is a lot better understood, but wouldn't we need, if we want to normalize, and by normalize I mean you don't want violence against trans people, right? You don't want people being run out of town. You don't want these people being kicked out of school, bullied, mocked, whatever. That you don't want that. But if we're going to have that happen, isn't going to take all kinds of voices, both at the farthest point left, all the way into the center and onto the right, wouldn't we want to uplift conservative, like transgender people as well?
Yeah, sure, but I mean, if you're referring to Blair, I mean, she's done her fair share of demonizing trans people because, you know, I mean, you can be conservative and not do that.
Can you
stuff.
name me one conservative trans person that has not been demonized by the media?
I don't know, but I mean, again, it's nothing to do with their transness. It's to do with
if you could find one.
It's to do with their beliefs, right? I mean, if you're talking about, again, if you're talking about Blair, she's a trans person.
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, I don't know a lot of conservative trans people. I know Blair, but I know that she's a bigot, she's a racist, she's a transphobe. She has built her platform of shitting on other trans people. I mean, she spent a lot of time demonizing Riley Dennis, who was a fantastic trans YouTuber, and basically trying to define what Riley's identity is based on nonsense transphobic ideas. And spreading that to her audience.
Some of this, though, right? I mean, part is an idea disagreement, and then part she absolutely apologized for, and like, to me, that shows a ton of growth. But when she has enormous fans in a lot of places, and in the places in the Middle East, all over, it seems like if we have any hope of kind of normalizing, at least at a minimum, an anti-bullying, anti-violence thing for trans folks, we're going to need people all across the political spectrum.
Yeah, but I don't think that means.
I challenge you to find one conservative trans person that has not been vilified. And then when you apply that, you might think that, wow, maybe you disagree with Blair on a lot of things, but actually she is a proponent for trans issues.
But she's not. Like, she's clearly not. I've spent a good part of the year taking apart Blair's bullshit when it comes to trans issues. And sure, she's a trans person, but she holds some very transphobic ideas and perpetuates those to her audience and helps to normalize those ideas within that audience. And that, again, is what I've been talking about like people of a certain identity can perpetuate those ideas and
you would need a lot of
help to normalize that within a culture, right? It spreads those harmful ideas, and as someone who has influence and has that quote unquote, like, she's a trans person, so she must be right kind of thing, you know, that helps to keep those ideas alive within a large group of people. Which says that you can't be trans if you don't transition, or you can't be trans if you've got an Adam's apple, or you can't be a trans woman if you've got a penis. You know, it comes out and says that stuff.
No, she does.
Well, you know, Mike, and this, you know, I don't really like talking about individuals. Yeah. Unfortunately, Blair came up, and Sargon and Bering, and individual. You kind of figured individuals. But I will say this. You know, you did say she was a bigot and a racist. Now, these are the same criticisms that were leveled against us, that were bigoted and were racist, just because we disagree with people on certain things. So, you know, first of all,
I'm not leveling those against Blair because my disagreements. Like, she's literally put blackface online. That's racist. There's no question.
Well, she did. I mean, she did an entire video of people that were trans or LGBT or LGB in Middle East countries, or, you know, Muslim countries, and they were talking about how inspirational she is because she can speak her mind. She is out there, you know, getting the word out and helping normalize this thing. So, and
being happy about it.
Yeah,
she doesn't look at being trans as a negative.
And she actually shared the stories of these people. I mean, just imagine how powerful it is.
Yes.
To someone that lives in an oppressive society that would be killed for what they identify
by
as
the state,
and to have someone that like her, you talk about status, someone at her status actually read their story and talk to them. I mean, you know, a bigot, in my opinion, wouldn't do that. I mean, a bigot's
going to... Then, on the other hand, you've got her perpetuating ideas that lead to the suicide and murder of trans people in Western societies.
Okay,
I mean, you have trans people getting murdered because they go home with someone and then they the person finds out that they have a penis or whatever, and they get murdered. That happens. Trans people get murdered for not having the correct genitalia.
But what does Blair have to do with that?
She perpetuates harmful ideas that help to.
But by this
those
logic,
kind of
you
ideas,
can predict all of critical
Hold
theory.
hold on. Like when we make those statements, though, like what's an example of Blair saying that you should take a trans person home and kill them?
No. She didn't say you should take a trans person home and kill them. I'm saying that she has engaged in rhetoric. For example, her whole thing to do with Riley for months or a year or however long it was, continuing to misgender Riley, continuing to make fun of Riley's appearance and saying that, this is obviously a man because of the way that Riley looks, not because, and that's helping to distill those bigoted ideas within her audience.
Yeah, but don't you see? Okay, that's one example. Riley Dennis.
No, she apologized for that.
Okay,
though.
fine.
Yeah, but that doesn't change her distilling those ideas within her audience.
I get it. I don't know all the details behind this, but Mike, you have to admit YouTube is a world where there is drama and that there are these these rivalries, and that kind of sounds to me like
it wasn't a rivalry. Riley was very. I don't think Riley has ever made videos about Blair or anything. She was happy to go on and do her own thing, while Blair continues to find videos about her and laugh at the fact that of certain ways that she looked or whatever, continuing to distill those bigoted ideas within her audience, and that adds to a culture of transphobia.
I get that part, but if
I'm not saying that she's specifically, guilty of murdering a trans person or whatever, but I'm saying that her behavior helps to.
But this isn't
transphobia.
Transphobia means I have an irrational fear of all trans.
No, that's what I was.
I could have an irrational fear of a trans person's politics, and this other trans person over here suits me fine. That's not transphobia. That means political.
This is what I tried to explain to you before. Transphobia is and can be the perpetuation of marginalizing ideas and behaviors. So when you engage in behavior that actively marginalizes trans people on a population level, surely you can see that as harmful.
Okay,
but it sounds like in this case it's
it's
one individual. But then she also apologized, and she also shared the stories of
but it
LGBT
also means that trans people
and,
are by definition marginalized. That there's not one that that loves being trans. And I'm sure
there is not. You keep saying this thing about that there is not one of them that can't. No, it's a population thing. Trans people are marginalized.
Bad. Like I say, wow, every black person I've seen is poor. Therefore, I'm going to assume black people are poor. This is.
I'm not saying. I'm talking about statistics here. I'm talking about like actual statistics that we have, that we know. I'm not saying from people that I see. I'm not saying, oh, I saw 6 trans people who were living on the street, therefore trans people are marginalized. That's not what I'm saying. You're straw manning me here, man.
But why do it? No, I'm not straw. I hope I'm not straw manning you. I just don't.
You definitely are.
Okay, but let's say it was true that like maybe it was in the 1950s that 95% of women were homemakers. Well, then, sports isn't a women's thing. I'm going to be like, because it's out there. I'm just citing data, and now I'm using this as justification for my prejudice. Like, why don't we just judge? We could dispense with intersectionality, critical theory, all of it. If we just judge people by individuals and said, you know what, I can't tell by your sex, or if you're non-binary, or if you're trans, or if you're black, or an immigrant, or whatever race you are. Like, I don't know anything about you. Talk to me. And
yeah, but I mean that's
all of it.
That's not the entirety of society, right? I mean, again, if we go back to like the black prison population thing, I mean, that's nothing to do with getting to know people on a personal level. That's to do with a society, with a system that is set up
people to not judge by labels and percentages. To judge.
I'm fine with not judging people based on, but that's kind of not the way the world works.
Okay, then let's be the change we want to see.
Okay, yeah, but in the meantime, we still need to be able to look at how the world is and try and fix injustice. To fix injustice, we need to see where injustice is on a populist level, and then we need to focus efforts towards those things. So, like, we can look at the fact that 1% of the population owns billions and billions of dollars, and the rest doesn't, and we can implement policy to try and change that. We can't just sit back and go, oh, okay, that's just the way things are. To fix that inequality, we have to take steps to do that. And the only way that we're going to, I mean, you can go to Jeff Bezos if you like and say, hey man, do you reckon you could give me some of your money? It's not going to work. The way that we're going to get the money away from those people and help other people who don't have that same thing. I mean, people are born into those situations where they just can't earn that sort of money. I mean, the way that we're going to help those people who don't have housing, who don't have food, who don't have education, is by taking that money away from those people by taxing and giving it to those poor people.
It just seems like those that promote this, like Michael Moore, Bernie Sanders, all have 5 homes. Like, why aren't they practicing what they preach? I
don't really care. I think that doesn't change. It doesn't change the idea. I mean, I don't care what Bernie Sanders. I don't care what Bernie Sanders. I mean, Bernie Sanders is a social democrat.
I just think that a better strategy would be to judge everyone by an individual, because it sounds like to me you're advocating tribal. Okay, we agree that that's the best, but I'm just going to be tribalistic for now. And
how am I being tribalistic?
Because what you're instead of saying we ought to judge everybody as individuals, you're saying, well, let's judge people by groups, and since they're not equal, whoever the group that has doing the best is now the oppressor, and we need to take stuff away from them and give it to the other.
No. That is definitely not what I'm saying.
That's what I'm hearing.
No, that's not at all what I'm saying. I mean, first of all, that's kind of the case, that when you are a person in power, having some of that power taken away feels like you're being oppressed. But you have to. I don't see how, looking at the state of the way things are, for example, trans people are disproportionately more likely to either commit suicide or to be murdered. We could look at that statistic and say, okay, what are we going to do about it? I mean,
I agree.
Okay, so that's that at its very core is what intersectionality is.
Right. Okay, but at some point, like, let's say that that suicide rate never goes away, right? No, the murder rate. Okay, let's say that normal, but in some ways, if you
there are reasons for why the suicide rate is like that, right? I mean, we can look at what the reasons are. I mean, huge rates of mental illness within transgender people, which can be related to many things to do with how society treats trans people, how schooling systems treat trans, just in general. You get higher rates of mental illness because of certain factors to do with society, and these are things that we can change using policy, using education and things like that. And to just go like, okay, now we're just going to make people just treat everyone as if you would treat. I mean,
it's just the method. I agree with you in that if you do see this high suicide rate, considerably higher than the normal population, but this seems like the solution that critical theory offers is blame society and overturn society.
That's
not my solution.
That's one of the issues I have too, because I think a lot of it, no matter who you're talking about, boils down to responsibility. Did you go to college? Did you do certain things in your life? Did you make certain decisions? And there's some people that make good decisions. There's some people that make bad decisions. But to sit there and punish people that make good decisions because there are people that make bad decisions. I mean, at some point, it has to boil down to the individual, black, white, Chinese.
I don't think that you're punishing people for making good decisions, right? I mean, you.
Well, you just said take the money away from people.
I know, but okay. So give me a justification for one person owning how many trillions of dollars does that motherfucker own? There is no way that he has worked. You can't say that he has earned that money, especially with the state of the company that is in the state of worker exploitation and him refusing to let people unionize the state of the factories and things that he owns. Sure. I mean, he has not earned that money. He created a thing and then he has exploited the workers and gained the money from those people.
Are you talking about Amazon? You're talking about Amazon?
I'm talking about Jeff Bezos specifically,
okay.
Right.
So we're talking about Amazon. Okay, so you're absolutely right. I actually like taking the example of Apple. Apple, you know, they were utilizing Chinese labor. I mean, these people were working 22 hours, 24 hours, whatever. They actually had to put suicide nets outside of the building because people were throwing themselves off the building because of how much work it was and killing themselves. I mean, this is truly a problem. But in America, you know, we have OSHA, we have the federal government regulations, we have Better Business, we have all of these things in place that do protect workers. There are unions for those that do unionize. So someone like a company,
Amazon can't, like the Amazon people can't, like
they may not be able to. They may not be able to. But in our market, I mean, with unemployment being as low as it is right now, people have choices to go different places, work at different jobs. Again, these are the choices of the people that are working in the company. Now, I can't speak to, you know, what their wages, what their you know, what experiences they're having. If, you know, if it's truly that terrible, they do have opportunity to go work somewhere else. They don't have
like honestly, I think
let me just finish this one point. So Amazon in general, so like we do have an Amazon warehouse in Wisconsin, and it does employ hundreds and hundreds of people that do make really good money. So it actually does provide really well for the local economy. I can't speak to all about it. I don't know their business model, but just taking the small sample size of Amazon here, that company does give us like huge, from an economic standpoint, like huge opportunity. So I can't sit there and say, hey, take all this guy's money away, because he's actually providing for, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people.
I'm not saying take all of it away. I'm saying take most of it away, because I can't see a moral justification for one person owning so much money while so many people have nothing. I don't think that personal choice at all should factor into whether someone has a house, has food, has, you know, I think that the bare minimum, and I mean, you know, maybe we disagree on this, but I personally think that every single person should have a house, they should have food, they should have an education. Like, I think that's the bare minimum.
Obviously, like a trillionaire. I mean, it's insane money.
There are more houses in America now than homeless people.
But where would you set the limit? Okay, so let's say we both agree on $1 trillion.
I just told you the limit.
What about 500 million? Where would you put it?
I mean, the limit comes with the income, right? I mean, it depends. It depends if you're talking about doing it under a capitalist system or whether you completely destroy the system and start as a socialist system. If we're talking about just under a capitalist system, I mean, motherfuckers, hold on, let me see how much money he's got. Jeff Bezos, net worth, he's got $156 billion.
Okay.
You could take 155 billion of those dollars, and he would still be a billionaire. Now, that is no one has $1 billion.
But this is his company, right? This has got to be stock. And so much of what.
Yeah, I know, but you see what I'm saying. You see what I'm saying.
This isn't cash.
No, but you still see what I'm saying is that he has. I mean, again, you could take 1 billion of those dollars. I mean, there's still a shitload of money. You take. I mean, all I'm saying is that my goal would be that every person has housing, food, and education. I don't care who they are. I don't care what they've done.
But let's say that 156 billion, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say 150 million or billion of that is just Amazon itself. Okay, I don't know if that's the right number, but let's just say, and you only have 6 billion. So if you took away his 150, you took away his company.
Unfortunately, what you're doing is you're putting the people that work at the company in the unemployment line, and you know, Mike, you know, it's funny, it kind of forces.
And that's why I'm not saying that you just take away that money. I mean, obviously, there's certain things, like again, there's certain things you do under a capitalist system. There's taxes that you can impose. I mean, we're not even doing the bare minimum at the moment. You know, he is. You could tax a fair amount of that money, and I'm not. I mean, again, we're just talking about an individual person at this point. But I mean, there's hundreds of people.
Guys, they all seem to be on the left, and they're all giving away all of their money. I mean, look at Bill Gates.
Well,
Bill Gates is so much better than Bezos. But I mean, like, you look at Bezos or what the fuck's his name, the Tesla guy. You know, their priorities are in a completely different place. I mean, the dude's like, oh, I'm going to build a candy store and fire a car into space. Fuck off. Get some money to some fucking poor people.
There's untold stuff that could help us.
Yeah,
right?
the technology of
putting the man on the moon didn't do us much good in 1969, but it did the technologies that came out of that are awesome.
Yeah, but if you're ignoring people living in the street who have nothing for trying to do,
then we shouldn't have put a man on the moon.
Your priorities are just in the wrong place.
Do you agree that we shouldn't have gone to the moon in '69 because we even had?
No, I'm saying that if your priorities are to shoot a car into space over fixing social inequality, then your priorities are in the wrong place, and you're not a very moral person.
Well, so John F. Kennedy is a horrible person.
I would just say this: as we continue to continually kill the Earth, we're going to have to start shooting some people into space in order for the human race to survive. I mean, honestly, but you know, the interesting thing is I can't help but draw a parallel. So you're talking about Amazon, you're talking about their workers, and you know the status of their. But then if you look at someone like the Sultan of Saudi Arabia, the royal family there, and then the people that live under them, and like how they live. I mean, if you're going to compare, like obviously, you know, Saudi Arabia.
You're just doing that same thing again. You're just doing that same relative privation thing again. And I mean, we can't do anything about those people.
The whole thing, the fallacy of the same fallacy that you said. The reason why we're okay, you're not helping the people out in Saudi Arabia, right? Because you're limited. Now, Elon Musk, like, okay, that he's doing something, like, you know, so there's a commenter like Elon Musk has done nothing for humanity. He's like, right, like, yeah, like that's the point.
Yeah,
his
and like
Zuckerberg's
right. Providing internet in third world
right.
countries.
Isn't that the same fallacy that just because he chooses to focus on technology that will help humanity, why is that? Why doesn't the same?
It is to some degree, but also it's a question of means, right? I mean, yeah, he could, if he wanted to, snap his fingers and house millions of people. I mean, there's no question he could do that easily, but he doesn't.
Yeah.
Well, but you could at camp play the kids a song, or you could teach them how to play the guitar, right?
I do.
Totally different things, both valuable in their own way. Teaching them how to play the guitar might even.
He's not open to the idea. That's the thing. People suggest the thing to him, and he's like, "No, if I can go and play with Grimes for a while." You know, he actively doesn't do it.
By a bunch of people.
I am open to these. Like, if it was me, if I was in that position, and someone said to me, "Yeah," I mean, maybe he's just not aware of it. Okay, or maybe there's certain things. But like, if it was me in that position, if I had billions of dollars, I would instantly just build some houses for some people.
Sure.
Easily do that. Like, and he wouldn't. Like, it would be nothing. All he'd have to do is email his secretary and be like, "Yo, can you just, you know, sort this out?" And it'd be totally fine. And it could happen. But he does not. I mean, it's not like it's a lot of effort.
I don't know what he does with
like,
personal money.
Well, but not, you know, the people that he employs. I mean, that is him kind of doing it through the company. I mean, the big, you know, people in corporations or whatever. But
they create jobs.
They create jobs for people to do that for themselves and create opportunity for themselves. But you know, and I don't know. I don't know if he's you know, if he's given back or any of that. I have no idea.
I don't know.
But you know, you can't argue the fact that the importance of having these opportunities for people to provide for themselves.
But again, I think there should be a baseline, and I think that baseline should be housing, food, and education. That there should be no question. You should just get that.
But if you think about housing, right? I mean, you've got to get stuff there. Like the drone technology is going to help deliver stuff to remote areas.
Yeah.
But you have to have that technology before we can use it to give them water and.
No, but there are houses. I mean, there's something. I can't remember the exact number, but I'm going to say like 50 million empty houses in America, and they could just be. People could just be housed in them. But
there's tenement projects like in Chicago, right? When you give somebody just food, housing, and clothing, right? Without jobs and without purpose and without some way to, like, they devolve and they devolve to crime-ridden areas that were really hard to get out of.
But I think too,
is that worse than them devolving whilst they're homeless?
Well, I think it also too boils down to opportunities. There are some people in the world that have children that they can't take care of, and that boils down to personal responsibility too.
But you need both.
You need both. You need people to be taking.
There's also things to do again with society that come into that factor. I mean, you guys know about the cycle of poverty because of this. That is a well documented and understood phenomenon in a society where if you are born into poverty, you are more than likely to just continue to engage to do that and be in poverty for the rest of your life. To break out of poverty sometimes happens.
I think that's part of critical theory, and I think that's right.
I mean, it's not me just making stuff up. The cycle of poverty is a well documented, well understood phenomenon.
What about the IRS statistics though that show that an enormous amount of people get out of poverty? In fact, in America too. Now, over 20 years, it takes a bit, but a lot, especially immigrants, have come over and done very, very well.
You're probably just going to have to. Like I say, this is looking at the state of affairs, the way that things are, and drawing conclusions from that. And it is a well understood phenomenon that the cycle of poverty takes place, and it doesn't matter what you choose to do. Sure, there are people who can break out of that cycle, but because of the environment you're brought into, the people that you are brought up by, because of of course it's harder. And I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I'm saying that is a thing that happens, and because of whatever, it doesn't matter what personal culture is.
Why isn't culture part of this? Why isn't like parenting?
Well, that's part of it too, but also there's the human psyche.
And so we could pump a whole bunch of money into education and things in those areas. Like, again, from those people who have billions of dollars sitting around doing nothing. I mean, you can say that a whole bunch of this net worth is in the companies and doing things, sure, but there is no doubt that there is a lot of money sitting around just rotting, doing absolutely nothing, and that can be taken.
But it also suggests that money makes you happy, and that money solves all.
No. That is not what I said. What I said is using that money to provide basic necessities. I'm not saying giving money to people. I'm saying providing basic necessities.
And our poor, our upper middle class by world standards, they have the basic necessities.
Well, and it's interesting.
No, I'm talking about the people who don't have that, and there are millions.
Well, they're very, very
few. Keep shifting the focus. I'm talking about a specific amount of people.
It's tiny.
Yeah, the welfare system.
No, but stop. You're whataboutism. I'm saying specifically, there is a lot of money in certain places that can be used to help other people. You can say, what about this? What about that? What about this other thing?
There is. But what are the consequences of taking that money, though? See, that's what I want to think. So,
well,
to your point, it's a good one.
Some rich people can't buy a third island. That's the consequence.
$6 billion of Jeff Bezos's money and gave it and turned it into housing projects. Okay, our housing, and we make sustainable living or something. Okay, but what are the consequences of this? This is what's never ever talked about. They're like, this
Jeff
would be
Bezos can't buy a third island, and a bunch of people, millions of people, have housing, they have food, and they have.
Are we sure that that's the only thing? What if like a whole bunch of people had to be laid off to do this? Like, I mean, let me consider the consequences.
Let me just share this one experiment out of Chicago. Chicago had one of the worst project areas in the world. I mean, Green was terrible, and they've since torn it down. But what Chicago did, instead of creating more projects and redoing this whole experiment, what they started doing is those that were on renter assistance or welfare or whatever, they were putting them in high rises or like really wealthy areas or whatever, and they would still get their housing and food for free. They would still get all of that, but the difference is they're putting them around people that are motivated, the people that are that are taking care of themselves. And all of a sudden they started Chicago.
Section 9 housing.
Yeah, this is Section 9 housing. Chicago saw a huge increase in more success with people that were on welfare getting off of it, because they started getting inspired by the environment around them. So there is something to be said about taking personal responsibility and having good role models and prioritizing the right things. You can't just give someone a house and food and say, here, because that model, at least in Chicago, is proven to fail.
But I think it's also dangerous to assume that all the people who don't have housing and don't have food and all that sort of stuff are in that case because of their personal choices. And I'm not saying that's necessarily what you're saying, but I mean, there's an element of that.
What Sean's saying,
you're right.
That many succeeded under this model.
Yeah, that old model failed so miserably. I mean, there's innocent people dying every day because of the crime and the poverty and stuff. And they changed that model, and now they're seeing huge success with this new model of integrating people, into areas where people that are successful and motivated and stuff. So there is something to personal responsibility and, taking responsibility, I think.
But I honestly don't see a downside to providing basic necessities to every human being. I see no downside to that.
The how, we agree with you.
Yeah.
But it's the how.
Yeah.
Taxing the rich. Taking a lot of money away from the people who have.
Okay, let's assume we have the money, though. They do.
There's billions of dollars sitting around.
Robert Taylor homes in Chicago, or things like Section 9, right, where you break up the gang.
But I don't know specifics. I'm not claiming that I know the specifics of how to do it, but I do know. All I'm saying is that there are a lot of people that don't have basic necessities, and there are a few people who have more money than they can possibly do anything with, and it's sitting around doing nothing, and it can be used to help people.
Okay.
And morally, I think it is a moral duty for that to be used to provide basic necessities. Like, I can't see how that is not a moral good.
I think you're right,
Yeah.
but look at Bill Gates is giving away all that money. I mean, that's
I know, but again, you're just what about us, and you're saying what about this, what about that. I'm saying we can agree that I know there are philanthropists. I know there are billionaires who give away a bunch of their money and all that sort of stuff, and that's great. I think Bill Gates is a really awesome person. I don't think so well of Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, and I think this idea of like the self-styled, self-made person is a kind of a lot of guff. You know, I mean, it happens, sure, but it's a lot of luck. It's a lot of.
But how do we know Jeff Bezos isn't an Ebenezer Scrooge and that they'll have a dream one night and totally be awesome after? I mean, we have to give people some room to grow.
Oh, I don't know, but all I'm saying is there is a lot of money sitting around doing nothing, and there are a lot of homeless, poor people who are struggling to live, struggling to feed their children, struggling to educate their children, and this kind of goes into the cycle poverty thing. I mean, if you've got a family of 4, and you are trying to feed those kids, you're trying to send them to school and things like that, how are you supposed to? How are those kids in a generation's time supposed to feed their family and do whatever if they haven't been educated properly because of lack of money? They haven't been
have good parents, right? Like, I mean, like I had an enormous amount of parental privilege. Like, my parents were amazing, right?
You can have amazing parents, but if they don't have any money, then they're not going to be able to feed you or educate you or clothe you or house you.
Like, if they're there and that they have like the basics, like there's all these great examples of extraordinarily poor Asian Americans in New York City that are spending like $1,600 to get their kids like taking these tests into getting them into the highest possible programs, right? Which Governor the Cuomo or whatever just kind of.
Right, but I don't think that education should be something you have to pay for. But I don't think you should have to pay.
Let's say you had a ton of money. If you won't study, Mike, I can't get you smart no matter what you'll do.
Yeah, I know, but I don't think that there is so much potential there is going to be so much potential in those poorer areas, in the places where people just can't afford to pay for education. And I don't think that having money should be something that allows you, because there's going to be rich people as well that don't study. There's going to be all these rich dudes.
The socialists used to go into the poor areas, give people IQ tests, and pull them out, get them into gifted schools. We can't do that anymore, right?
Well, IQ tests are bullshit.
Yeah. Well, just personal experience. I mean, growing up in that neighborhood is a very poor neighborhood, and a lot of the families prided themselves because even though we were struggling, they prided themselves of not going on welfare. It was like a point of pride for them to say, we're busting our ass.
That's something I really can't get behind.
Those
people.
Let me explain myself. What I'm saying is that growing up, I felt the environment that I lived in, it was a bad thing to accept welfare. It was a bad thing to accept help. And for many years of my life, I needed to be on welfare to be able to sustain myself. But I always felt like a failure because of that. And that has affected me even to this day. But I think one of the most valuable things that I learned was it's okay to ask for help from the government, from certain people, to accept money, to be able to help continue to do what you need to do to live. And okay, it's all well and good to pride yourself on not accepting welfare, but the flip side of that is that you are kind of creating an environment where accepting welfare is a bad thing, and I don't think that's good.
Well, I think it's a good thing for people to strive to take care of themselves, though. I do think that. I think that.
Yeah, but I mean, if you grow up in a place where that's just not possible.
But that creates work ethic. That creates character. I mean,
I'm not saying pull the safety net for those that don't.
I'm not saying that at all. There's disability in place. There's certain people that can't work. There's certain people that can't take care of themselves. I totally understand the programs that are in place.
Think about it. If you were trying to study, right? Like if you really want to achieve and succeed in life, if you didn't have to worry about the pressures of paying rent, of affording food, of affording housing, finding a place, all that. If you didn't have to worry about that sort of stuff, how much more could you achieve in an educational setting, in a striving forward to try and improve yourself and trying to educate and learn and all that sort of stuff? How much more could you achieve if you didn't have to worry about that stuff?
Well, it's an interesting question because, you know, I've known the opposite. You know, growing up through college, I've met extremely rich families with rich kids that were given all the advantages in the world.
Yes, I know, but that is under that is under an unequal capitalist system. All I'm saying is if there is a baseline, I'm not saying that you are, equating a child who's brought up in a rich house, who gets absolutely everything they want, to a person who just has the basic necessities is completely there's none. It's not comparable.
No, but it was probably the parents. It's the rich parents that allowed that. There are
and the parents aren't going to change. I mean,
anything, and they train them right.
And you could still be a good parent and train your kids right while having the basic necessities provided.
Sure.
But I don't think that. So, I mean,
would you tie those together then? So let's say that the money was coming in, that we sourced it, right? I don't. So let's say it's available. Would you say
there wasn't even money?
Parents to use it the right way, that they can't.
That's what I'm saying.
But you have to meet XYZ metrics of actually helping your kid with your homework. All this.
Again, I don't know what the specifics would be, but I mean, say it was just you have a house, you have, I don't know, groceries arrive at your door every day. I mean, maybe you don't, or whatever, but I mean, you seem to be taking like a really nihilistic view of what people would be if they had basic necessities provided for them. I mean, people aren't going to suddenly become lazy, unethical people just because they can eat every day and sleep in a nice bed.
But if you have a purpose-driven life, though,
that's a retirement.
You can have a purpose-driven life. I mean, I'm a musician, right? I'm a musician. There is no way that I can, quote unquote, make a living off being a musician. But I managed to scrape by getting the money that I need to do that. And my purpose is being a musician and an educator. It's not because I want the money.
Sure.
It's because I enjoy the music, and I enjoy passing that passion on to children. And you can have that whether you are whether I have the basic necessities provided or not. Luckily, I do, because I've got myself to a place where I can have that. But I mean, passion and work ethic doesn't. I mean, if you imagine if you didn't have to focus on, I mean, because the thing is with like working and whatever, you're working to earn a certain percentage of stuff so that you can then continue to live and work and all that sort of stuff. And can you imagine a society in which people don't have to, again, it's the education thing, you don't have to worry about providing money for housing and food and all that sort of stuff. You can focus that on more productive things, on things that actually advance the zeitgeist of humanity, basically.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. I mean, there are countries like Italy and Greece and certain areas in Europe that they take all of August off. The problem is, and that is the model where they don't have to go to work and stuff. Unfortunately, their GDP struggles and they're not competitive. But
again, that's in a capitalist society. I'm talking about a different society.
Universal basic income. Is that what you're arguing right now?
No, I mean, it depends. Again, it depends on. There's different things. There's my values. There's what I would hope out of a society, and then there's what is realistic under the society we live in right now. And right now, yeah, sure, I can. If everyone was given $15, $20, $30, $40 an hour, that would be great, because I think that the money is there. That can happen.
I mean, you and Elon Musk have something in common, though, because I think he is for universal basic income.
Well, but he's against unionizing. He doesn't care about his workers. He has bad bad work environments, all that sort of stuff. His factories and death traps, all that sort of shit. He doesn't.
Opinion.
But Mike too, unfortunately, standpoint, yes, you can pay people $20, $30, $40 an hour. The problem is you become less competitive, and then countries like China or places like Indonesia and things like that, they
Yeah,
start.
see, again, that's yeah, I know, and see, again, it's my ideals versus what's realistic for society. So it's
okay,
that's fair.
And
totally
somebody
fair.
There was a super chat by Mr. D Highfly that asked if Mikey's brain is broken, but no, it's not. He's just looking at it in a fundamentally different way, and that's why it's hard sometimes to get back, because maybe I'm starting.
Is we're kind of talking from two different perspectives, and so I'd like to make it clear that I'm thinking about there's two different things. There's my ideals, and then there's what can be done under the society, because I know that obviously there are certain things that in the current state of society it can't be done, but there are ways that I hope the society could be in the future.
But I guess I'm using it the same way on not prejudging people by groups, because maybe it can't be done, but that is an ideal worth shooting.
Let me ask the last question on this topic, because your ideal world sounds great, and but there is this philosophical question. Philip K. Dick, the Gnostic writer, the one that wrote Matrix, he in the Matrix, they actually created the first version of Matrix where it was paradise for everyone, and everyone got what they wanted, and everyone, like it was perfect world and everything, but it failed because people unfortunately need some form of misery. Do you think that is the case, or do you think like in a euphoric state people are be totally happy?
No, I mean, I don't know, man. I haven't really thought about this too much, but like, I do think that the old saying that you can't understand the light without the dark. Obviously, there is means for contrast. You need to know those things, and I'm not again. I don't think that providing basic necessities for everybody is the same as putting everyone on drugs so that they're all hyped up and euphoric for the rest of their lives. I think there can be a baseline that we can build from. We can have a baseline in which everyone is comfortable and living, and they don't have to worry about certain aspects of their life. And then from there, we can push forward. And as a society, kind of, I think that that's a reasonable ideal to have. I don't see why that would be negative in any way.
Sure. Well, Mike, thanks again for your time, man. It was a long one. We kind of went long with good conversation.
It's been. I just want to say I know I might be kind of in my my tone kind of aggressive, but like I've really enjoyed talking with you guys. It's been super fun.
No, I didn't think you were aggressive, but hopefully we can have more of these conversations. And at Mythcon, you're going to be on stage with people that disagree on certain things too. And I think this is how you do it. No name calling. I mean, that super chat was ridiculous. There should be no name. Let's focus on the issues. Let's focus on people's perceptions and their ideas. And that's I think we did that tonight. I think we're going to do that again in Milwaukee, and I can't wait. I'm excited.
And like what you said too, when I say, look, this is the way it's coming off to me, right? And you're like, don't straw man. And rather than getting angry, you just kind of reclarified your position. Because I think that's okay. Like if somebody says, maybe you don't think this, but it's sounding to me like X, and like that's where we got to get. And it takes some patience. And
it's tricky because like I suppose the way that I talk and the way that I discuss these things is steeped in years of doing it and assumptions that I have about the way that I'm saying things. And so clarifying, obviously we're coming from different ideological positions, and so clarifying. Obviously, that was why you guys made a tweet, a whole tweet about what we should be talking about on the panel, and my choice was define intersectionality, because I think for one, we can be arguing just completely past each other if we don't actually know what we're talking about. Intersectionality is such a broad term, and
that's the first thing we're going to do is define it, and so everyone on the panel does agree with it. And that's, I agree. And it's one of those buzzwords that not a lot of people know what it is. And I'm glad we're having the conversation, because not a lot of events are having these conversations. And, in order to move forward one way or the other, like we have to know what these words mean. And,
I dig it.
So
Well, I'd very much like to come on to your podcast again sometime. It's been enjoyable.
Yeah, we'd love to have. Well, maybe after MythCon, or maybe while you're in Milwaukee, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'm generally around most of the problem is I do like contract work, so for 3 months, I mean, the next thing I do is I'm jumping on a cruise ship for 5 months, and so it's difficult to do.
That'd be a good place to do a podcast.
Which is the internet. So let me give you an example. The internet on the last ship that I was on, it cost I think it was like $40 for 666 megabytes at dial-up speed.
Holy
God!
Yeah.
You gotta get a jump pack, man. You gotta get one of those jump packs. But, yeah, we'll end it here. Mike, thanks again for joining us. Everyone out there, thanks for joining.
Guys. Yeah,
we may not be live again until MythCon. Maybe we will. I don't know.
Lots to organize.
Yeah, we'll see you soon.
But definitely, thanks, Mike. We appreciate it. Thanks everyone who listened. All right.